8 p.m. Eastern, here on C-SPAN.
Washington, D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton hosted a discussion on Tuesday on the unemployment rate among African American men. Also at the event, Professor Ron Walters from the University of Maryland. This is just over 2 hours.
Good evening. Hello. Let me welcome you. I'm so pleased to see so many of you here this evening. The noise you hear in the back is that there are more people here than we expected. That's good news because of the seriousness of the subject. So we brought out some extra chairs right at the beginning before we get started. Let me welcome all of you to this unofficial hearing of the Commission on Black Men and Boys. It's unofficial because they are constituted themselves. They are not They are not officials of the District of Columbia. The Commission consists of African American men who live in the District of Columbia who have credibility with other African American men. All right, so what am I doing up here then? Well, I initiated the commission about 10 years ago and was very clear that if we were to look at the dilemmas and the challenges of facing black men, it couldn't just be the Congresswoman alone in her official capacity. We had to focus black men themselves first and then our entire community on what amounts to hidden issues because they simply are not spoken about. The issues surrounding black men and their status in American society and what has happened to them. As I looked, I could see that we had paid attention to every member of the black family except the black man. Now, those of you who don't know need to know right now, I'm a card-carrying feminist. And I was pleased to be one of those who has led the fight to pay attention to women with notable results. Women finish college and high school, but wait a minute. We didn't mean college and high school more often than men. That's not what we had in mind. But that's what is happening. Reduction in the number of children so that black women can and do control their own fertility, and higher employment and professional levels in many professions of black women. Of course, we've always been willing as a society to support African American women and other women if they have children and no means of support. So there's even support for black women with children. And since they are the guardians of children, that seldom means support for black men in the same way. We do not support adults without children except through various anti-poverty programs. So we paid attention to women. We paid attention to children, not nearly enough. But here in the District of Columbia, for example, education is the #1 issue. We're so focused on children. And there are a plethora of programs, private and public, at every level of government for children. What about men? Well, men are supposed to take care of themselves, or so it goes. One reason that has always been the case is that men dominated the workforce. Men have the jobs. Women went out to work especially in the African American community. But the workforce was dominated by men. Well, when people work, they take care of themselves. Well, men no longer dominate the workforce, either white men or black men. Women are in the workforce today in almost equal numbers, not quite, but almost equal numbers to black men. Now, women still have a long way to go. We just passed the Ledbetter bill for equal pay for equal work. Women still work largely in stereotyped women's jobs. But we've made progress for women. And as a feminist, I'd be the first to say we've made some considerable progress, even as I press for more. Why are we talking about black men this evening? In the first place, the job market where everybody is in trouble makes it very, very easy to fail to disaggregate who is in the worst trouble, since all of us feel we are in trouble. If you have a job, whether it is a public or private job, you still feel you're in trouble. If you don't have a job, then you are among the 14.6 million Americans who are officially categorized as jobless. That's the 9.5% unemployment rate. But 5.9 million have stopped looking for a job. They are discouraged workers. They've looked and looked until they couldn't look anymore. And 8.5 million Americans are working part-time, but desperately want full-time work. You add all that together, you get 30 million people who can't find the work they need. There are some people who call themselves 99ers. Those are people who have been out of work for at least 99 weeks. That's how deep a recession President Obama found himself with when he took office. And yes, to be sure, is digging us out of. Remember, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month when the president took office. Now for 7 straight months, we have been gaining jobs. The problem is we found a hole dug so deep that you've got a lot to fill in before anybody knows you're filling in the hole at all. And unfortunately, that hole consists of real men and women in our community, along with millions of other Americans. And it has been very tough for those out of work, especially for black men whose official unemployment rate is almost 16% compared to about 8% for white men. And yet we had the toughest time even getting unemployment benefits out until this month. It was to the 7,600 D.C. residents who finally got their unemployment benefits when we passed them in early July. It was as if people let them eat cake. And yet we've extended the unemployment benefits only until the end of November. Why? Why is there a fight even to get unemployment benefits today when there are 5 people looking for every job that is open? I have said to my Republican colleagues on the floor of the House, I don't know how you could have shut down unemployment for the first time in memory. Whatever arguments we had in Congress, everybody recognized that you had to do unemployment insurance. And that was like threading a needle this time. Even though unemployment benefits are an immediate stimulus to the economy because they are spent immediately, and yet we could not get unemployment insurance out until the beginning of July, and a 60th vote came in the Senate with the new Democratic West Virginia senator, and the bill was passed. We in the House had passed this bill over and over. We couldn't get it out of the Senate. Here we're talking about jobs, and we're looking at people who had no jobs and had no unemployment benefits either, even though you pay unemployment into the unemployment insurance fund, not only the employer. Very bitter pill to swallow. With men, women, and teenagers out of work, we have lost sight of African American men altogether, even though, even in boom times, their unemployment rates remain stagnant. Not what they are today, but pretty stagnant. Our concern here this evening is not only with the men involved, it is with the fragile state of the African American family, where 70% of the children are being raised by single women. And this state of affairs began with the loss of jobs in the manufacturing sector beginning in the late 50s and early 60s. Therefore, if you care anything about the state of Black America, you've got to begin to focus specifically on Black men and not assume that the economy is taking care of them. Now, we're not going to just be talking about this evening, as we hear from you as well, the audience witnesses, because you are going to have the opportunity to come up and testify, as they say, for a few minutes, each of you who desire, after our witnesses have testified. But we're not only talking about what the society has done to Black men. We're going to be talking about what Black men have done to themselves. We're going to be talking about what our community has done to them and is not doing for them. This is a societal problem, but it is our problem. And we cannot hand our men off to a society which has been uncaring of them forever. But when we look at this recession, men have been hit much harder than women. So far, 4 out of 5 jobs lost were held by a male worker. That figure astounded me. I recognized that male unemployment was greater, but I did not understand the depth of it until I saw these figures. The reason is that men have been employed in the most vulnerable industries. 1/3 of Black men 16 to 19 in the United States today are unemployed. Black men have been employed disproportionately in the manufacturing sector. That was good for us because those were high-paying, often union jobs that created the first African-American middle class. But those are the jobs that have steadily declined over time. For example, African-American share of manufacturing jobs 40 years ago was almost 1/4 of those jobs. And you know the areas they would have been in, steel, auto, and the like. Almost 1/4 of the manufacturing sector, Black men. Today, their numbers are down to 10% in the manufacturing sector. But the whole manufacturing sector has collapsed in this country. That's why many of us in my Democratic caucus are saying, let's get America back to making things, not just back to work. Black men were hugely disproportionately hurt by the collapse of the automobile industry. Everybody in the African American community ought to be applauding the bailout of the automobile companies and what it has meant now that all of them are back. Every last one of them, if ever the United States made a good investment, it was in the auto companies, instead of letting all of our auto companies go down. The reasons for what I have just described are many and disparate. Persistent racial discrimination has enhanced the other factors that are on the table. And those factors, of course, cannot be ignored. Studies have shown that employers are generally more adverse to hiring black males than others. And there is a heartbreaking study done in New York by Princeton University professors who looked at a large group, 1,500 employers in New York City, and found that a black applicant without a criminal record was no more likely to be employed than a white applicant just out of jail. This builds on stereotypes of who the black male is. And it means that a disproportionate number of black males are hurting the entire group. Because when they see a black man come in, they see our incarceration rates. Black men are incarcerated at a rate 7 times white men. Now, we know that there are many societal reasons for that don't lie at their doorstep. But they've got to carry that record around for the rest of their lives, so then we've got to do something about that. Even if you say it's because of the communities that they come from, it's because of the crime-infested communities with no jobs. Whatever you say, a black man with a record, on top of being a black man, is in trouble, and everybody knows it. And yet, do we really want a whole generation of black men to be unemployable, to be unmated and have no families? We've got to focus on black men whether they have a criminal record or not. And we have not done so with black men of any kind or description. So today we are going to look at all the reasons, not just the easy reasons to talk about. We're going to look at some of the tough reasons. We're going to look at education as a root of the problems of almost everybody who's out of work. If you've got a high school education, you've got a college education, your unemployment rate is way lower, the less education than those with less education. Everybody's competing globally now. You're not competing with each other. You're not competing with people in the neighboring states. You're not competing with other Americans. You're competing globally. They don't need you. They can go abroad. Therefore, we need education, all of us. That message has got to go, especially to our younger black men. This is a knowledge economy. Yes, we have to make things. But the more advanced you are as an economy, as a nation, the more you're going to depend upon people with some college education. There is still work. Yes, there is work for those with basic schooling. But it's going to require stable lives, mostly without criminal records, except for the very fortunate, and decent education. Black men have to understand they're not competing with the man who was in the cell next to them. They're competing with a black man who's never gone to jail. So if 2 black men walk in the door, no matter how rehabilitated the ex-offender is, there's no avoiding the choice that most employers would make. That's why we've got to get to our young men before they get to any any description of jail or prison. So that tonight, the commission, and I'm going to turn it over to the commission now, will look at the entire context concerning the balance between unfair stereotypes that confront black men and boys. On the one hand, they are huge, and issues such as educational and job preparation that handicaps so many black men in our country today. I'm going to turn it over to the commission, who will proceed with the witnesses.
Good evening. We'd like to thank Congresswoman Norton for, again, convening this group. My name is Donald Isaac. I'm one of the commissioners, and I will be serving as chair in the absence of our chair tonight, Isaac Fullwood, who could not be here. We want to make the best interest of time, so what we're going to do is, in the next 60 to 90 minutes or so, introduce the other members of the commission, give a brief introduction to those members from our panel, and let us hear from them, and after which time we will then hear from members from the audience. So we'll begin on the left with...
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Byron Browder. I'm National Chair of Concerned Black Men.
My name is George Stark, and I'm the founder of the Excel Institute, which is an adult education job training school in the District of Columbia. I think I want to say that these are, as the Congress lady said, very difficult times. Ward 7, Ward 8, Mo, you probably know better than me, the unemployment might be 30%. Regardless, the thing here is we've been doing this for a while. We're pretty knowledgeable about it too. I'm in the education business, and at the end of the day, you know, I'm looking out at the audience, and you guys are adults. You're not kids, so therefore we're talking about adult education, and that's fine. Adult education is fine. You know, the only way to insulate ourselves, our family members, our cousins, our uncles, is through education and having a trade. You have to have something that you can market. You know, the economy goes up, the economy goes down, but there are trades out there that always, always, always are looking for people, and I think you might want to think about being in one of those businesses. You know, at the end of the day, as the Congress lady said, it is education. You know, it's education at an early age if you can do it the right way, but if somehow you just messed up and you got locked up and you were an ex-offender, or you're not an ex-offender, you're just 25 or 30 years old and you didn't really go to school, you know, and the job market closes up and you're trying to think what to do, you need to think education for all of those listening. You need to think learn a trade. That to think that somehow you can, that you're employable without having a trade is, you're just kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself, and you need to stop doing that. So I'm going to pass this on. I could talk about this for hours, but just want to be clear. That's what I think about it. This is what I do for a living. You need to insulate yourself. If you're talking about employment, and you're talking about taking care of your family, and you're talking about taking care of yourself, you got to think you have to bring something in. You can't just walk in the door and say, well, you know, there should be a job for me. You need to create your own job, you know, learn a trade. Anyway, I know lots about that. Maybe we'll get to that. Thank you, George Stark.
Hello, my name is Ronald Moulton. I'm a board of directors of the Peaceaholics and also co-founder of Return Citizens Incubator.
My name is Marvin Dickerson. I'm on the representing 100 Black Men of America. I'm on the National Executive Committee, and I'm currently the immediate past president here in Washington, D.C.
We thank each of the commissioners, and at this time we're going to hear from our expert witnesses who have assembled to address this very critical issue. First, we'll hear from Dr. Ron Walters. Dr. Walters is both political activist, scholar, and premier leading thinker in our country today, and has been for over the past 30 or 40 years. He has taught at several universities. He served as campaign manager and consultant in Reverend Jesse Jackson's presidential bids both times. And finally, he's married to Patricia Ann Walters and lives in the Silver Springs area, Silver Springs, Maryland. I'll give the three introductions and then we'll hear from them in this same order. Secondly, we have Michael Jones, who is one of the leaders in the legal field, has a national trial practice that has carried him to numerous states throughout this country. We are proud to have him as a member of the Washington, D.C. community. He has been acknowledged as one of the 75 best lawyers in Washington by the Washingtonian magazine and one of the top black litigators by Black Enterprise. So we're glad to have Attorney Michael Jones as well. And last and certainly not least is Rodney Mitchell, who serves, gives us a great example of community activism linked to the practice of law. I think when I think about Rodney, he has a very distinguished resume and career, but I think of him as a native of Southeast and also one who had deep roots in South Central Los Angeles, who was caught up in certain the implications of certain consequences of certain decisions in the criminal justice system, and who, as we watch his career, took a step-by-step approach, taking him to adult education, to junior college, where he eventually graduated at the top of his class at the University of California in Berkeley, and eventually graduating from George Washington School of Law and was a practicing attorney here in D.C. So we have a wealth of experience. We're going to stop talking so these gentlemen might lend to our information and understanding regarding this issue, a very important issue confronting our community. Dr. Walters.